Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of St. Paul's Letters to America. I am your host, Ray Gerard, along with your co-host, Bob Hennekeys. Bob, thanks for being here again today.
Good to be with you, Ray. Thank you.
St. Paul's Letters to America. So this is the prologue today, and could actually write a letter not to the Ephesians, the Colossians, or the Romans, but to the Americans. What would he tell us? Well, we're going to give you our idea of what he would tell us, and we're going to do it with a certain motto in mind, which is love and kindness, but always through the light of truth. The letter today from St. Paul, let's mix it up a little bit today. We're not going to mention the issue for today. First, let's just do the letter from St. Paul. What's the letter? The letter would be a very short one today. For you did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you received a spirit of adoption through which we cry, Abba, Father. Period. That's it. That's all. That's all there is to it.
That's nice.
What does that mean anyway? What is that? By the way, what is that even? So you did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you received a spirit of adoption through which we cry, Father. Well, think about it. What if you did not receive, he talks about a spirit of slavery. What would that be? What would that look like or feel like? Well, how about we just say simply this? Imagine, knowing what slavery is, how about a spirit of slavery being anything that is not freeing, anything that keeps you from being free? And what would that be? Well, if we are free, if we're truly free, then we have the ability to extend out, do we not? If, in fact, our views, our perspectives are limited to ourselves, to inside ourselves, or we're concerned with simply ourselves, would we not be trapped? Would we not be something less than free? But if we're free, wouldn't we be able to extend towards other people? And if that's the case, wouldn't we be able to travel? In terms of our spirit, our personality, wouldn't it be able to be free to roam and travel? And what would it do? When it encounters other people, how would it interact with other people? Would it be for their good? Wouldn't that be free? Wouldn't that be more liberated? But if we're trapped inside ourselves, would we not be just, fearful of things? Because if we're only concerned about ourselves all the time, then it's like, okay, well, am I gonna, I'm not going to have money for this. I want, maybe I'm not going to, maybe I want this new car. I want to get it. I need to have it, and I need to work really hard. And you just keep, the gerbil running on the treadmill, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. You can come up with any one of, a number of examples, of your own choosing. But if we're of a mindset that is geared towards thinking about ourselves, then it's going to be about things perhaps we want, and maybe the things, and then be fearful we're going to lose those things. We're not going to be able to get those. It's going to be a more inhibited kind of way of thinking of things. But what does St. Paul have to say instead? Well, if you don't have a spirit of slavery, which would make you fearful of these things, around us that could hurt us, that could deprive you of whatever, it is you want, whatever concern, you may have, not, being able to, surmount that, if we didn't have that, or if we did have that, we would be fearful of these things that could happen to us. But what would we have instead? What does St. Paul offer us instead? Well, it's a spirit of freedom. It's a spirit of being adopted, a spirit of being connected to God, to the universe, to everything that is. And not only that, but he adds a little caveat to it. Not only we connected with all that is, he adds a caveat. We cry, Father. So it's not just that we're connected, but we're connected in the way that a child is to their father. It's like everything that's living, that's out there, we're all family. I mean, he's bringing a whole different element into this connection with the rest of the cosmos. And what is that? What is there in a family but love? And so that's the view that St. Paul has.
I think, Ray, as I read this and think about it, to me, it is a wonder what St. Paul does, because in essence he's saying that God wants us, loves us so much that he wants us to have our choice. He does not want us to be slaves. He wants us to have our choice. But he's not going to put himself equal to us. He is the creator of the universe, something that we can't be, nor will ever be, or nor will ever strive to be. But we can be part of his family, his loving family that he wants to take care of, to be with us, to share our emotions, share our victories, share our losses. Mm-hmm. And he puts that in a way that says, yes, we are not equal to God. We're not even close, but we are loved tremendously by God, and therefore we are not slaves. And that goes along with whenever I think of someone who is a slave to drugs, or a slave to sex, or a slave to work, any of those things that we can just get mixed up and cause ourselves trouble, that's what we can be in slavery to. But God, he's wonderful, he's freeing, he's loving, and he's giving us our choice always. Free will is what he has directed for us, and we always have the choice to do whatever we want. What a wonderful thing.
I just think about slavery. I mean, what is a traditional, stereotypical image of someone who's a slave? Perhaps someone who's shackled in chains. How about a prisoner in a jail cell? Is he free? Is he free to do what he wants? Free to do anything? No. And what is a person that is in those kinds of conditions? What do we what can we think about them? I mean, those people are alone.
Oh, very lonely. I can't imagine. Tomorrow, once again, I'll be going over to the prison to pass out communion to the prisoners. And when I look at them, when I look into those prisoners' eyes and see them, they are just lonely and scared to death. And a smile, and in bringing communion to them, it's like I'm handing them the world. And it is so wonderful to be able to do that, to take care of those folks, and to see that smile that comes from sort of a dark place when they first walk into the same room that I'm in. And it's not me. It has nothing to do with me. It has to do with God in the host that I am bringing to them. And the smile is unimaginable. From loneliness and fear and concern, all of a sudden to being freed and be able to receive God is just such a wonderful thing. It is such a neat thing to be able to do that.
So, with all of that as our backdrop, what do we have in terms of a story or an issue in our society today to which we're going to apply this? How about this one? See if you think this fits at all, because by the end of this show, hopefully you're going to think that it does fit. All of what we said does fit. Let's consider the case of a little girl out in California. She's in 8th grade. She's 13 years old. She's homeschooled, but periodically they have tests or assignments that they have to submit to the school authorities to justify, what's being done at home and to prove that, in fact, the children being educated at home are getting, a good education. Well, one of the things this little girl had to do was submit an assignment, I guess, for a musical course she was taking. She had to submit a piano assignment. That's all it was, an assignment. And so she liked the song, Joy to the World, the Christmas Carol. And so she submitted that. I don't know, it was a videotape that was uploaded. I don't know exactly how it was done, but she submitted that assignment. Well, it was rejected. Rejected. Why? Now, mind you, she was just playing the piano. There were no lyrics that were sung. She was just playing the melody. But the reviewer, the person at the school who was looking at this assignment, said, hey, this is a well-known song. and people do know the words, and you speak about, and this song does speak about God. And, it's not so much, I'm not bothered by this. It's not really me. It's not, I wouldn't do this for myself. But, there are these auditors for these homeschool, programs. And I don't think the auditor, would pass this. So I'll tell you what, no, you can't do this song. And so the child's mother apparently is a person who's active in defending her faith. She contacted some lawyers at pro bono legal organization, the Pacific Law Institute. I can't recall exactly. Anyways, she contacted some pro bono lawyers who specialize in these types of cases, and they were threatening to sue the school. So the school backed down. And rightly so. Rightly so. This is not a performance that was going to be rendered in front of the entire student body. This was not something that was going to be, played as part of a Christmas play. It was not going to be done at a football game. It was simply her own individual homework assignment. Why would a school official say that was so out of bounds when the only question is, can she hit the right musical notes, to prove that she's, been learning how to play the piano? Well, we're going to try to figure this out because, often enough, you hear a story like this and you'll just pass it off. Well, it's what happened. Somebody got a little, too zealous, whatever. They were afraid of, the rules. They're just trying to follow the rules, et cetera. And we just pass it off. But, is that proper to just pass it off? Should we, in fact, look at it? Because really, it does seem sort of incongruous with the way people should probably normally act to one another. Wouldn't the normal reaction be, well, I've got these reasons why maybe I don't think this is such a good thing, but you want to do it, it's important to you, okay, fine. If we're acting towards one another in a way that we could call human, wouldn't that be the more normal kind of response? What actually prompts an official to impose on a little girl some, draconian, ruling that she cannot even for a homework assignment perform a song that is meaningful to her? If it was a song about, racism, by a person who is a victim of racism, something, and they wanted to do a song that was very meaningful to them, would we have the same reaction to it? So, let's probe this a little deeper, shall we?
Well, Ray, the other thing, as a teacher, I am just amazed by this. Now think through. I'm grading an assignment to see if it hits the marks, right? My guess is if I have a rubric in front of me, it says, did the right chords get played at the right speed, in the right order? There was no singing, so I don't have to worry about carrying a tune. I guess on there it might say is the piano in tune. But there is nothing that I could see in any way, shape, or form from the way I grade that could say she's done anything wrong. In fact, I think it'd be almost impossible for me to pass a non-fail grade or a failing grade to an administrator, to a parent, to a fellow teacher. I can't imagine anything that I could say that could somehow say this assignment wasn't fulfilled and did not meet any rubric, and I can't imagine anything was ever given to the child or the parent that would say this is a rubric and how it failed, right? I can't imagine that. It's completely contrived. When they heard the song, that had to be completely contrived. There was no way that was written up or there was any knowledge of it beforehand.
By the way, as an interesting little side note, the person who was reviewing this assignment at the school in California had a suggestion for this girl. She said, "I tell you what, forget Joy to the World, but why don't you just do Jingle Bells? Jingle Bells is a nice song. There's no religion in Jingle Bells." Well, problem is, if you're looking through news articles, these days recently, I was anyways, there's another article that just came up just at the same time. These are things that are happening contemporaneously. There's a guy out in a professor of the theatrical department, a professor at a university in Boston. I think it might be Boston University, but whatever. And he takes the view that you can't play Jingle Bells. You can't, we can't have, because it's racist. It's got racist origins. Apparently, he has some reasons. It was first performed in a blank minstrel show back before the Civil War, and he's got other reasons that he tries to make the case that this is a racist song. So we probably shouldn't be listening to this song either. So the question is, now, so what is okay anymore these days? What is? I mean, it'll make your head spin. But we're very concerned about with what other people think all the time, and so in large measure, or in one of the ways that this manifests itself is about Christmas. This is the Christmas time of the year, and so this is the time of year when you're going to get a lot of stories these days about ways in which Christmas, the very subject of Christmas, can be offensive. This person who told the girl, you can't do George of the World. It's because you're not afraid of telling somebody else what they can and cannot do. And it's done in or under the defense of, geez, we don't want to offend people. But at the same time, that's exactly what we're doing. And anyway, so every year around this time of the year, we're going to get more and more of these stories coming up. Like, for example, there's a little, tete-a-tete going on in Wisconsin over what to call the tree. Let's just say that tree in the state capitol building. It's a big evergreen tree that's decorated with lights and so forth. But Governor Walker, who's a conservative governor, had called it the Christmas tree. Well, there's a new governor in Wisconsin. He's got a different view. She calls it the holiday tree. And so there's a fight going back and forth about what to call that. In Charleston, they have a parade every year for the Christmas holiday, and we're going to change it this year to the holiday parade or something like that. And then there was a lot of feedback, and now they're deciding, okay, we'll call it the Christmas parade. And of course, there are a lot of stores, during this time of the year that will either use the word Christmas or they'll make a corporate policy decision to explicitly not use the word Christmas and instruct their employees accordingly. And every year, there's a naughty and nice list that's put out by the American Family Association, and so you can go there and find out the stores that either will say it or won't say it. So there's this thing every year about Christmas that seems to bother people or get people agitated. For example, even just last year, one of the cases that came up last year was the Washington Post, in effect, republishing a story that they had published some years earlier. So in 2014, they ran a piece by a gentleman who claimed that Jesus was not a historical figure. And after that happened, there were a lot of people, scholars, who responded to say, well, no, that's foolish. For example, the Roman historian Josephus and others, there's plenty of information in the historical record to say, no, he was a real person. You may dispute over whether or not he rose from the dead or not, but he was a real person. But so this person, wrote this piece, and it was debunked. For that single voice that he voiced to say, hey, there is no Jesus. There are a lot of other scholarly voices that said the opposite. Well, last year, the Washington Post effectively, they tweeted a link to it. So effectively, they republished the piece. Well, why? Why is there some compulsion to still put this out there, still maintain this narrative, still disturb? During the Christmas week, they put this out. Why, whether or not Jesus was a historical figure or not, why is it necessary to talk about that and say that he wasn't at Christmas? Why? So that's kind of what's going on here. Well, as to why that is, well, perhaps several factors can help explain it. Really, what it comes down to, the question as to whether or not there is God or there is no God, and a lot of people, I think, have a certain fear. They will say that there is no God and it's fine and there's no problem with it, and that they're very comfortable with that. But deep inside, perhaps, they still have a fear that there is no meaning to life, that there is nothing that happens to us after we die, that, it's as if you never existed. There is a certain fear that goes along with that. And juxtaposed with that, you've got all these other people running around the world who think there is a God and he loves us and it's beautiful, and perhaps as a second cause for what we're living with today, there's an envy of these people. They're just happy, and to a certain extent, out of envy, you say to these other people, you know what, you shouldn't be so happy. If I'm not going to be happy, you're not going to be. Is that perhaps not often the response? People that are envious of others, you try to take away what they have. And perhaps a final reason might be simply the agitated state of mind that we have these days. When do we rest? When do we relax? We worry about so many things. There's just this general attitude nowadays of being so agitated, and it's not just me that says that. Bishop Fulton J. Sheen talked about that, and he said that is actually a function of modern society. He wrote a book called Peace of Soul. And on the very first page of that book, he said that modern man is impressed less with the order of nature than he is with the disorder of his own mind, which has become his main preoccupation. It is the human personality, not nature, that really interests and troubles people today. Not the visible things of this world, but the invisible frustrations, complexes, and anxieties of their own personality. These are modern man's starting point. Now, he was writing that at a time when Freud and psychology as an art, as a science, was very predominant, and I think in large part he was talking about that whole phenomenon and men's all interest in psychology. But is that not still true today? Is not what he said still true, equally true, or even more true today? Now, today, psychology has, in terms of explaining what happens in the human mind and so forth, has largely been surpassed as sort of the thing that's of greatest interest to the scientific community these days. It's been surpassed in terms of, like I said, this interest in the scientific community with neuroscience. And neuroscience basically holds that we've got these neural pathways that are formed, and we form these electrical connections inside our brains that are largely the result of habit. We experience certain things, and those experiences cause certain mental responses. And so those experiences that we have early in life shape the pathways of these electrical impulses, and we associate certain feelings with certain things, and so that begins to form how we think about things. And we carry those early habitual pathways later and later into life. And so our thinking ends up not being our own. You hear the common phrase today, well, you're wired for it. I mean, that's what they're talking about when they say that. You're wired. You're just wired that way. You're wired for it. That's what they're talking about. So our thinking's not even our own. If you have an original thought, I mean, if you carry this explanation of how the brain works to its logical conclusions, this is where you end up. And this is how people who think about these things, this is what they believe. Our thinking is not even our own. We're not even free in our thinking. If you have an original thought, well, no. It's really a product of some, type of neural pathway that was affected by some experience you had as a child. I mean, it's Freudian in a way, but it's from a biochemical kind of standpoint. But it's got a very similar ring to it. So we have that. We have transgenderism these days. Can you not say that we're impressed, as Sheen said, that you're impressed less? We're impressed less with the order of nature than whatever order is in our own mind. And this is going to the point now we're even pushing disorder onto not only kids, but our own children. We've talked about these types of things in this program before. Where a teacher tells a school child there is no such thing as a boy and a girl. Where a parent is taking a boy and trying to make him into a girl. I mean, if there's an order to nature, if there are visible things in this world that express perhaps that order, would it not be as a starting point our own bodies? You know, and what kind of features we have to our own bodies? But now we're even to the point where we're denying that. If that's not more wrapped up with our own minds than it is with the visible world, you know, you got to come up, try to tell me a better one. Another example, colleges and universities. We have all these safe spaces because there's a speaker that, you know, may be so disturbing to us that he's going to do really the equivalent of physical harm. That's, you know, I mean, if you're not familiar with the arguments on this, trust me, that's exactly what is said. Hearing, you know, bad ideas is the equivalent of violence to people. And so we need these safe spaces. I mean, are we not more concerned with our own minds than anything else at this point? So we're living with this. And this is not something that just was a creation of Mr. Sheen. Bishop Sheen. Bishop Sheen, I just defrocked him. So Bishop Sheen, let's not go with somebody who's like on the verge of being sainted, so I suppose that's not a good thing. Anyways, so Bishop Sheen quoted Carl Jung, the famous psychiatrist, who wrote, it was about 100 years ago, this was from a writing of his in 1933, and Carl Jung, describing the mind of modern man, said, well, basically describing the difference between modern man and men that, you know, were living, men and women who were living in the Middle Ages. He said, men back then were all children of God, under the loving care of the Most High, who prepared for them eternal blessedness. And they all knew exactly what they should do and how they should conduct themselves. Such a life no longer seems real to us, even in our dreams. Natural science has long ago torn this lovely veil to shreds. That age lies as far beyond as childhood. That was his view of modern people. And that's exactly, you know, that's exactly how things are. People are agitated to the point where there's nothing to feel safe about. At the same time, we're demanding safe spaces. You know, we're denying the thing that can give us the most safety and security. We're denying the reality of it. We're denying that there is any kind of reality that has order or comfort or safety or security in it. So we're creating a problem, and then we think we can solve it with just, well, we create a room where college students can go to be safe, and they'll have cartoons and stuffed animals and crayons. You know, we're regressing. You know, Carl Jung says, you know, we're not children anymore, and yet, you know, we're taking college kids and treating them exactly like they're children because we've taken away everything that gives them order and security. I think we can replace it with a box of crayons. That's, you know, so, you know, but why would we even be doing this? I mean, again, we get back to that question, why would we even be doing this? Why would we be telling people, you know, no, you really can't have Christmas? Why would that ever, you know, be where we are?
You know, Ray, for me, and probably is the way I grew up, Christmas is a safe space for me, right? I am filled with the thoughts of my grandparents sharing their German traditions with me as a child. I am filled with the thought, as I decorated my house last night, I was filled with the thought of my mother and the way she would decorate the house, and she would put things together, and we would play Christmas music, and the whole family would get together, and we'd all work on the tree together, and we would all change the house around so that it was dressed up for Christmas. And that is an amazingly safe space to me. The thought of the family loving and enjoying one another and being together and celebrating the birth of our Savior, to me, that is one of the safest of all safe spaces. And so it's hard for me to imagine that we could actually be trying to take this away. I guess as you were talking, one of the things that floors me most is that somehow we don't understand from the church. And I have had this brought up to me many, many times in my education as I learn and am trained to prepare to be a minister in the Catholic Church. The word that most closely represents God is love. God is all about love. God is all about taking care of us and loving us like a father, as we got from St. Paul today. And so it's hard for me to understand someone who says, don't play Joy to the World, don't play Jingle Bells, when in essence, for me, that is, and I think the Catholic Church as well, that is love. It is God who loves us so much that he gives us the opportunity to actually make our own choices. We get to think about things like the neural paths in our brain because we have free choice that God has given us to allow us to do so. And we get to choose to either be with God or not. And I think it's just a wonderful time of year, and hard for me to imagine personally that we would not understand the love of God and the wonder of Christmas as it comes.
So still trying to understand why this is. Perhaps it's useful to know this war on Christmas is not new. This is not new. For example, during the French Revolution, they banned Christmas religious services. They used to have an annual, there's a special, at the Christmas season, there was a special annual holiday cookie called the Three Kings Cake. Well, they renamed it the Equality Cake. So that was, during the French Revolution, they murdered hundreds of priests. They appropriated all the church properties. It was very, anti-Catholic Church at that point. And so Christmas was obviously, that was not allowed then either. In the Soviet Union, Christmas celebrations, were prohibited. Children were encouraged to protest the Christmas tree and actually spit on the crucifix. In Nazi Germany, Christmas celebrations were canceled. Christmas, if you do not believe in God, when other people, are celebrating the most joyous time of the year, that's a problem. And people inevitably, try to squelch it. And so what do these instances have in common? Well, they have this situation where, you've got a regime that is anti-God. This war on Christmas, people may say it's about not offending other people, but is it not perhaps more about other people who are anti-God, who don't believe in God, trying to impose their rule on other people? There's this whole question as to whether or not we just don't treat each other well anymore. We don't treat each other like other humans anymore. If in fact you don't believe in God, fine. But why must you then tell other people that they shouldn't either? Well, the defense is, well, we're not doing that. Christmas, look, if there's a war on Christmas, the defenders of the other point of view who say we shouldn't say Merry Christmas and things of that nature will tell you, if there's a war on Christmas, the Christians have won it. It's already been won. That's what they always say. That, you just look around. You've got, indications of Christmas everywhere. So there's really no doubt about it. But yet, there's a push to try to reduce the amount of Christmas celebrating that we do, and so there is an impetus in that direction, and it's so the question is, well, but why? Why won't you let other people celebrate? If other people, let's postulate for a minute that this is related to probably the most basic human emotion there is. If we're going to explain something that doesn't seem to make sense, why don't we go right to, the core of things. The most basic human emotion, love. Is love involved in this? Can we make a case that there is love or lack of love involved in this? Because what is it that you would do? What's the hardest thing to do with a family member if you love them? The hardest thing is if you think they're making a mistake, or if they want to leave home before you think they're ready, or any one of a number of other things. You let them do it anyway if you really love them. You might talk to them. You might suggest to them what might be a better idea. But in the end, you can let them make their own decisions. If you love them, that's what you do. Because it's their life. And the Catholic Church has always said that we have free will and that God loves us. And that's why we have the free will. He's going to, in a loving way, let us still make our own decisions. And when we encounter situations where people are saying, no, you can't play a song for a simple homework assignment, even if there are no lyrics, we're not allowing them to be free. So there is I submit to you, there's a lack of love there. Now, you can say, well, yeah, but you can't really expect love between a school administrator and a student. Well, on some minimal level, yeah, why not? I mean, should we not treat all other people that we encounter with some element of love? And if we're not, then what are we doing?
I think St. Paul basically said that when we started off the program. He basically said that is what we are doing as human beings and what God does with us. That love is how he treats us, and he allows it. I have to look back, Ray, as you quoted those three places. If I was to look back in history and pick three places where I would be scared to death to be a part of, France during the French Revolution, Russia during the Cold War and the Soviet Union, or Nazi Germany, those are all places that I would think are totalitarian, where someone else other than God who brings love is telling us what to do. I would much prefer almost any other period of time where we are allowed to love and love one another and not being told what to do. I myself like to be a free thinker. I like the opportunity to think my own thoughts and to render what is correct. And I think that's what we should be doing for one another. We should be taking care of each other and helping us understand, but then allowing us each to make our own decision.
So if this is true, if the direction that we're trying to take this is actually somewhat on target, then you might think that, well, people that are imposing this anti-God, anti-religion, anti-faith kind of point of view on others are not sensitive enough to the offenses that they're causing to other people. And following our argument even further, we're saying that's because they don't have the same view of love or the same attitude towards love. They don't feel the same need to be loving towards other people that people who believe in God do. Well, now that's perhaps very objectionable. Could that be true? Do people who don't believe in God actually have a different view of love? After all, we're all still human. Well, I'll submit to you a letter that perhaps the most foremost, that's a little redundant, foremost atheist in the world today, Richard Dawkins. And he wrote a letter to his 10-year-old daughter talking about love. And he said, people sometimes say that you must believe in feelings deep inside. Otherwise, you'd never be confident of things like, quote, my wife loves me, close quote. But this is a bad argument. There can be plenty of evidence that somebody loves you. All through the day when you're with somebody who loves you, you see and hear lots of little tidbits of evidence, and they all add up. It isn't purely inside feeling, like the feeling the priests call revelation. There are outside things to back up the inside feeling, looks in the eye, tender notes in the voice, little favors and kindnesses. This is all real evidence. So he seems to be, and telling this to his own 10-year-old daughter, that, if you want to believe that, somebody loves me, it's not really a question of, really deep inside feelings, that you must believe in these deep inside feelings. It's just a matter of question of evidence, their outward actions. It's a matter of, experiences, what you experience. There's a guy, and so this is this suggests a very different view on love. There's a fellow, his name is Frank Cronin, and he is a degree in theology from Regent University, et cetera, et cetera. Apparently also a postmaster's study at Holy Apostles College and Seminary. Anyways, he wrote a piece on atheistic views on love. And he says to them, love is a real experience, just like, Mr. Dawkins was talking about. He said, but do they really believe in love beyond its experienced reality? And he says, when someone says, I love you, does he or she really think this is merely an attempt to enhance survival or civilization or avoid fights over sexual partners? I mean, to atheists, often enough, love is either a biochemical sensation or it's some kind of adaptive artifact from a more primitive era from which we've evolved. I mean, love is it's cold. It doesn't, it's not what you think of, in the traditional romantic sense of love. And love of that sort is subject to change from moment to moment, as Mr. Cronin writes. It's not stable. It's not reliable. If it's not based on something actually that exists inside, or maybe even beyond that, something that exists between and among people, that it's something real that connects us. They don't believe in that. And so what's left? What's left is a shattered shell, his words, a shattered shell of selfishness and self-interest. That's some, perhaps, idea of an atheistic view of love from Mr. Cronin. And what's interesting about Mr. Cronin is he is a former atheist. So he writes of what he knows.
Ray, one of the things that I think of, in fact, some of the greatest moments, the things that I remember most in my life, is the first time I saw each of my children. That's ingrained almost like it's a movie that I watched yesterday in my brain. Now, there was no physical connection. My children are all adopted. So there was none of my genes in any one of these children. And we hadn't been fortunate enough, my wife and I, to carry the babies for 9 months because of the adoption. Yet, the first moment that I saw each of those children, there was an unbelievable love and connection. I could imagine holding that child for the rest of my life. I could imagine being with them when they rode their bike for the first time. I could imagine being with them when they got married. I could imagine being with them when they had their first child. And there was nothing there to prompt that. There was no connection physically. There was no connection from a gene standpoint. This was just my child. And the love and the connection between them and me, when that moment hit, was more powerful than almost any of the other recollections I have in my life. And it's an amazing thing. So love is not something that someone else does or some observance. There was nothing there. That child, in fact, each of them almost completely was asleep the first time I saw them. They were hardly moving. There was nothing they were doing but laying there. And yet the love, you could feel the love rolling out of my ears and my nose and my mouth and every other place that it could exude, because that love was so wonderful and so tender. There's no doubt that comes from God, not something in my brain, not some other place, but it came from God. And that love of child is an amazing thing.
I mean, that child hadn't, you said the first time you saw your adopted children, that child hadn't done anything to you at that point. So what were you responding to? Well, if you're not responding to something, then why would you feel such love to those children, unless there was something that, there's something real about love. There's something real that ties us to one another. If atheists and people who don't believe in God don't believe in that, and I guess it makes perfect sense. if you don't believe in God, that you'd have a different view of love. Because if you can't feel the love of God, what is the most intensive love that there could be? The love of God, it surpasses even our imagination. It surpasses our wildest attempts at imagining God's love. And if you can begin to feel that just a little bit, then then what comes from that is simple joy. And if you don't believe in God and you can't feel any of that, then what kind of love are you going to have? And if you live in an atheist world, sometimes encountering that kind of love could be strange to you. For example, there's a gentleman who wrote a piece, and he calls himself simply AFP. He identifies himself simply by those initials. Anyways, he said, "I'm an atheist. I have been for as long as I can remember. All my closest friends are atheists. We do atheist things like fear death and worry about the meaninglessness of life." But then something funny happened to him. He fell in love with a girl who was an intense Christian. And he says, she thought I was naive and I thought she was delusional. And he says that his girlfriend's faith is intensely personal. It means just so very much to her. And she used to tell him when he'd have problems of one sort or another that, she'd tell him, "I'll pray for you." And he described that as infuriating at first. He'd say, you're telling me that you're going to pray to, like some imaginary friend, and he just was bothered by it. But then he began to realize over time that this was perhaps the most intimate gift that she could give him, because it meant so, her faith in God meant so much to her, that if she was going to try to do the best thing that she could for him, that's what it would be. She would pray for him. And so then, he says, now, when she says she'll pray for me, he says, I feel warm. I feel supported. I know that she is reaching out to me from the deepest part of herself. Excuse me, sounds a little bit more like love. He goes on to say simple things like the Bible is full of good stuff. That's interesting. She apparently quotes passages of the Bible to him, and he's apparently impressed by it. He envies her in a way. Now, we talked about envy before. Well, she envies him. He says that she does not fear death, my girlfriend. She doesn't crumble when people she knows pass away. She cries, of course, but she doesn't fall apart. She feels safe and secure in the knowledge that they're with God now. I envy that. I'm a mess when it comes to death. So he's describing an atheist experience. Well, if this is perhaps similar to what other people experience, now we can give maybe a little bit of an insight into why people get to the point where they tell little girls, you can't sing this song, you can't say Merry Christmas, you can't do this, you can't do that. It's because, wouldn't that be bothering? If you're a mess inside, these things bother you. If they bother you, how are you going to act as a result of that? There's got to be consequences to feeling this way. Anyways, and we're going to suggest an answer to that too. But before we do, it just is another very interesting little tidbit. He ends this article that he wrote with a quote from Ephesians. The atheist now is quoting Ephesians. And he says, as the last words in this article he wrote, be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love. So he's perhaps well, if in fact, there's an interesting poll that was done on Valentine's Day and people's beliefs in Valentine's. Who ranked lowest on the list of people who, for whom Valentine's Day is important? Let's see, lowest on the list. Oh, you're gonna love this, Bob. But the ones lowest on the list were scientists.
That's a little rough. That's a low blow, Greg. As a scientist, that's a low blow.
But a close second from the bottom are atheists. So, anyways, okay. So, what is the reaction of people who have these kinds of feelings that we've been describing? They feel love in a different way. They feel a mess when they're trying to consider, death and the meaninglessness or meaningfulness or lack of meaning in life. How are they likely to act? Well, how about this? Let's put this out for your consideration. Have you ever been in a relationship with somebody who's possessive? Have you ever been in a love relationship with somebody who's possessive? I've witnessed it firsthand. I've been very fortunate. The wife that I've been married to now for 34 years, 34 plus. She's very loving. And so I've been lucky. I've been blessed. But I've witnessed firsthand in my family people that have been involved in a possessive relationship. It's not pretty. If you go to Psychology Today, like I did, you'll find an article that describes a situation where basically a lot of times people who are possessive operate from a fear of not being loved. They, perhaps they had an experience in their childhood, and they have trouble trusting other people because they did not feel loved. They're afraid they're not going to be loved. And so when they get into a relationship with a partner or a spouse as an adult, they have that same fear. And so to protect against that, protect against maybe that person pulling away from them and, breaking the trust that they've, tentatively got in the love coming from that person, they're going to pull them closer and closer and closer and not let them get away. So if you're in that kind of a relationship, what are some of the earmarks? What's likely to happen? Well, one of the, again, referring to an article that I got out of a psychological journal, the first warning signs is an article on the characteristics that you're likely to encounter from people like this. This is sort of like a help article trying to show people, okay, well, these are the warning signs that you should pay attention to if you notice any of these in your relationship. And it says that the first warning signs are the negative comments and rejections toward the partner that are disguised as false modesty. Well, not too long ago, we mentioned on this program you gave a passage from a book by Mr. Dawkins, The God Delusion, where he said, I've got no answers. I don't have the answers as to why, people believe in religion. But nonetheless, even though I don't have those answers, people should not believe in religion. Religion is destructive. Parents shouldn't be allowed. The government should not allow parents to pass their faith on to children. So even though he's got no answers, he doesn't know why people believe in God, he knows enough to tell them what they should do. Does that sound like, false modesty? And the negative comments and rejections. If you look around, you'll find a lot of negative comments, a lot of derisive comments about people who believe in God coming from people who don't. They basically look at people who believe in God as backward, uneducated. Anybody who still believes in this hocus pocus malarkey from from the Middle Ages and before, you're just not modern. You're just not giving credence to science. We get this stuff all the time. Another characteristic, these people always seem to be on the defensive. They get angry easily. And again, you can find plenty of examples of this happening. There's the term I use for it is gratuitous hostility. And we see this especially in the Christmas, situations. For example, if you say Merry Christmas to someone, I've experienced this, you say Merry Christmas to somebody who's not in favor, they will look at you with a scowl. Some people will look at you and say, great, thank you. And other people will look at you with this angry scowl. You get this all the time. What else? We got several more. For example, another earmarks is people deciding making decisions for other people without taking what they want into account. Well, we started this program with that very kind of example. No, you can't perform that song. Another trait, they don't want their partner to have interests they can't control. What did I just say a minute ago? Parents shouldn't be allowed to, pass their faith on to their children. So if these are some of the earmarks of a possessive kind of love, and, we're suggesting that, people who want to deny the belief in God to others have a very different view of love, well, can we not say perhaps they even have a disordered type of love, an overly possessive kind of love? We're talking about, You can't say Merry Christmas. You can't even play, forget sing, you can't play Joy to the World. You can't do this, you can't do that. Is that not, if nothing else, is that not possessive? So I guess maybe, in just to wrap this up, it's just not loving. It's just not loving. If other people want to believe in God, if they want to celebrate Christmas, if they want to be merry and be happy, let them. Let them. Kanye West recently gave a performance at a jail, a men's facility and a women's facility. And the Freedom from Religion Foundation up in Wisconsin wrote a letter. I think this also happened in California. Wrote a letter to the jail authorities. Said, "You violated the Constitution. You can't do this." Now, if you go online, you'll find pictures of men kneeling and praying. You'll find videos of women in the women's facility singing along and singing with Kanye West. Well, what are we talking? Kanye West performed faith-filled music. It was rap music, but it was faith-filled. It was his way of expressing his faith, and they appreciated it. They liked it. They wanted it. But this is now a constitutional violation, and the Freedom from Religion Foundation demanded that the jail authorities never allow that sort of thing to happen again. Possessive? Not possessive? Why not just let people do what they want? If they want to find happiness in God, then let them. Some people don't. And we're running into that again this time of the year. We can find many examples, and we'll continue, years ahead to find more and more of these examples. But behind all these examples, we submit, is something deeper, something possessive, something controlling, something that's not loving. And instead, we do have a message from St. Paul, that says, don't fall back into slavery. Don't fall back into fear. You were given a spirit of freedom because, and this is a message for America and for everybody at all times and all places to hear, there is a God who loves you. There is a Father. And that's the message that perhaps we would do well to hear this Christmas season. This has been Ray Gerard, along with my friend and my co-host, Bob Hennekeys. We thank you for listening. We hope this has been somewhat interesting, enlightening, fruitful, and we hope you'll join us again.
And I hesitate to say, Ray, but Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, Bob. Thank you, everybody. God bless.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.